Good morning and welcome to Our Issues Milwaukee. I'm your host, Andrea Williams. Our focus this morning is on race and race relations. There are several scenarios that have reignited the debate about race relations in our country as well as right here in our community. Social unrest combined with political unrest has made it clear that positive change and hope for better understanding of each other as human beings is needed in order for us to all move forward as one nation under God. In this half hour, we'll meet individuals who share their personal experiences in regards to race in the form of books. My first guest is the author of The Only One in the Room, a lifetime of observations on race, Mr. Milt Thompson. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for being here. And I'd like to start off finding out more about you and your journey that led you to writing this book. You were born in Racine, graduated from Horlick High School and attended college at UW-La Crosse and UW-Eau Claire, and you went on to become superintendent for not just one, but several school districts across the state. Tell us more about that.
Well, after spending a good part of my career in Kenosha Unified as a teacher, as an administrator, as an elementary principal, and then finally as a central office person, I was so well prepared by the superintendents that were there that I interviewed and secured the job of superintendent in Beloit. Okay. And Beloit was an ideal place because Beloit's an urban school district. It's a smaller district, and so it has the same dynamics, the same issues, but it's a microcosm of what Milwaukee would be or a larger city would be. And I was there for several years, and my primary job was to convince the people in the community that even though Beloit had gone through economic downturns and other things, that the school district could be a major player in the resurgence of Beloit and that kids could get a great education. And especially I wanted to address the achievement gap and those kinds of issues.
Right.
From Beloit, I was recruited to be superintendent in North Chicago. It's a community that's south of Waukegan. High poverty, primarily African American students. State of Illinois took over the district, made incredible promises that I would have almost Napoleonic powers. And after a year, I found out that none of that was true. And so I limped back to Wisconsin, kissed the state line on my way back. And then a short time later, I became superintendent of the Pulaski School District, which is northwest of Green Bay. It's a rural school district, primarily white students with a smattering of Oneida students because the district's located within the Oneida Reservation. So I've had urban, I've had rural, and then this last year I was the interim superintendent in Clinton, Wisconsin, a town that's about 6 miles east, I believe, of Beloit, and it's all rural. And it was one of the most pleasant experiences that I had as a superintendent.
Wow, that's quite a resume. And you've said that being a black male, you've had many experiences inside and outside of education that relate to race. And I think you just mentioned a few of those. I'm assuming all of those things led you to writing this book.
Well, what really led me to writing the book was, as a superintendent, there's a conference, there's a fall and a spring conference of a group known as WASDA. It's the School District Administrators. And in 2013, I was attending the conference in Madison at the Concourse Hotel. And I'm sitting there in a room with the other 425 superintendents before the session starts. I'm in a ballroom. And even though I'd been to that conference before, all of a sudden I started looking around and I said, oh my goodness, I'm the only one in the room. By that I meant the only person of color in the room. And no sooner did those words hit me than I sat there and I thought, that would be a great title for a book. And so a few days later, I went back to my apartment in Pulaski and started writing the book. Some authors tell me the hardest thing is coming up with the title. But with that title, the book pretty much wrote itself.
Wow. And the rest, as they say, is history,
the
right?
rest is history.
Now, with that, being the only one in the room, would you say that experiencing that, especially from a professional standpoint, do you feel a certain amount of pressure or isolation or anything of that nature, being the only one in the room?
All of the above at times, because what happens is this: even though as a child growing up in Racine, when I grew up, there would be instances where, as an African American male in high school, if I went to a conference at Wing Spread, let's say, I'd be the only African American in the room. When I went to college, there were a few, but proportionate to the number of students at Eau Claire or at La Crosse, you could sit in many classes where you were the only one in the room. And so, and since I've chosen to take jobs in districts that are rural, where there's not a significant black population in the area, I found a lot of times, as Superintendent Pulaski, I would walk into the football stadium and I would be thrilled if we were playing Sheboygan or Oshkosh or some team, and if I saw a black student out there as an athlete, it almost noticeably lowered some of my isolation. I mean, I almost wanted to throw a party. But I've been a pioneer, and I come from a family of pioneers. So being the only one or being the first one isn't foreign to me. It's just, it just takes an adjustment every time that I go into this, because then I've got to remind myself not to count numbers and not to see people primarily just as being white or African American or Hispanic when they're in a crowd or when I'm doing a presentation or whatever.
Makes a lot of sense. And race relations are often uncomfortable topics. A lot of people just kind of like to steer away from it. And some of the issues that we deal with, not only locally but nationally, have caused us not to be able to really ignore that subject of race. Right. You have the killing of innocent black men and women of color at the hands of police. The Black Lives Matter movement has caused a lot of conversation, and most recently, the presidential election, needless to say. So during his campaign, Donald Trump, who needless to say is the president-elect, he spoke of banning Muslims and building a wall that pretty much left us in a state of division. I think that's a good word, a divided America. And there are people who were actually even afraid to say they voted for Trump because they were afraid of how they would be perceived. So what are your thoughts on observing all of the things that have taken place up to this point?
Boy, the conversation on race is necessary because there are people, including people who voted for President-elect Trump, who hold views, and I never use, I try to refrain from the word racist because it's thrown out so much that it's lost its value to me. But there needs to be conversations on race where people can sit and talk about how they really feel, where someone who's concerned about the possibility of immigrants who come in from Syria being terrorists mixed in with them, where they can have a conversation where they're not, where someone doesn't throw the term Islamophobe at them. Because what I found is this, and the reason that I wrote the book was to facilitate those kinds of conversations in a kind of safe zone where people can say whatever they're thinking without fear that they're going to be minimized to an invective. And that concerns me, and part of it is, I guess, because when I was in college, we talked about race all the time. I have one roommate who's white, who was from Argyle, Wisconsin, another who was from Evansville, Wisconsin. So we sat up and we would talk about race into the wee hours of the morning, and nothing was off limits. And they would ask stupid questions, and I would ask stupid questions. And stupid questions are not really stupid questions, they come from a lack of experience. And when you look at this country and you look at the fact that there are a lot of whites and a lot of African Americans who do not have close personal friends who are of another race, it feeds that kind of, not just division, but the lack of hardcore, get down in the dirt dialogue, where with a friend you can sit there and you can say, I don't understand this, and throw it out and not feel threatened, because they're not going to call you a name just because you're asking a question about their culture or their ethnicity, or you have a particular viewpoint. The lack of discussion, what troubles me is, by not having those discussions, people who hold views that might be racist don't have to come to grips with those views, because they're never in a position where someone with the counter viewpoint will sit down with them and have a non-threatening conversation with them. And that's true whether a person is white and is a racist or is black and is a racist. Without that dialogue that sharpens off, or that grinds off the rough edges, they never have to change their viewpoint, because they primarily hang around with people who have the same viewpoint.
Yeah, and that's the key, really having conversations and sometimes getting rid of those stereotypes that are there. And people have conversations all the time where they say, you know what, I never knew that.
That's right.
And it changes their perception and does not allow them to put everybody and just swipe them with one brush. You know, you really learn to see people for who they are and not what they look like. So that's a very important thing.
One thing about the book, I have a lot of the input that I've gotten from people is, I would have never known that from primarily a white audience. I would have never known that people felt that way or thought that way or had experienced that. And to me, a lot of the comments that I've had on Amazon and other places have been those kinds of comments. And that's great, because I did not write the book for a black audience or a white audience. It's primarily stories from my background, because I believe that people can relate to stories and experiences. And it's very gratifying to me when people say, I would have never known, I've never experienced that. And again, there are a lot of people out there who do not have African American friends. They may go to work with people of different races, but they don't socialize with them. They don't go out to eat with them outside of the context of work. So there are things they wouldn't know about a person's upbringing and other things.
Yeah, so this is the perfect time for you to tell everybody who's at home watching how they can get their hands on this book, The Only One in the Room.
The Only One in the Room is available through Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Christian book distributors as well. So far it's been selling fairly well, and I'm pleased with the reception that it's gotten.
Well, and hopefully there will be a lot of people who are now exposed to this book and will go and add it to their collection, because it really is something that is worth talking about and taking in somebody else's experiences. Maybe you'll understand, maybe you won't, but that's what makes it very interesting. So as we wrap up, you have 4 sons, and we always hear people talk about the fact that they have to have a conversation with the young black men in their lives, because there's so much that's going on in the world today where they're judged by the way they look. What is it that you say to your sons about growing up and really just being a part of this world today?
Well, it's funny, I've had to teach them a certain amount of survival techniques. What's ironic is in the book I talk about my parents having to teach me survival techniques, because I was a northerner. My parents were from the south, so we would go south and they'd have to give me the talk about, you better say yes sir, no sir, and all of that when it came to interacting with white people in Mississippi, where my father and my mother grew up. My conversation is, if you get pulled over as you're driving down the interstate, put your hands on the steering wheel and keep them in a death grip. Don't think about reaching for your wallet. Don't think about going for the registration. Sit there like you're a statue until the police officer comes alongside and asks you to roll the window down. I mean, it's those kinds of things. I experienced that as I was going back to Pulaski, where I got pulled over because my lights weren't on and it was dusk. And the police officer, I put my hands in the position and looked straight forward. And when the police officer approached my car, I looked up at him and I was so relieved because he was Hispanic. And, you know, if I'm law abiding and I'm a superintendent and I feel that kind of anxiety in those kinds of situations, I've talked with my sons about that. I've, obviously told them, look, if you're in a situation the police ask you to do something, do it.
Wow.
They ask you to, get down on your knees, get down on your knees. Because if you're more prone to get into a situation where a police officer might have a higher anxiety level because you're a black male, which is wrong, but we've seen that happen, then why play into that? Why become defiant? And why create the very confrontation that could lead to your being shot or your being killed? Yeah. So, no, I've had that conversation with them, with all of my sons. And my sons, because they're mixed, except for my oldest who's adopted, who looks like he's straight out of a hip hop, video, my son Nate, but they're every shade. My son Matt, who's my second oldest, whenever he flies, he's the one, because he looks sort of Middle Eastern, he's the one that always has to take off his shoes and goes off to the side. Amazing. I don't think he's ever had a flight where he wasn't diverted into the other line. Wow. So we've had these conversations, and their stories and their experiences are recorded in the book as well. They were wonderful contributors because their experiences are slightly different than mine. And so I wanted to demonstrate from my parents' generation and growing up in the Jim Crow South to look at race and the experience of race, cross-generational, all the way through my own sons and what they're experiencing.
Wow, pretty amazing, and that's the reality we live in. So thank you so much for coming by. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
My pleasure.
And all the best with your book. Milt Thompson is the author of the book, The Only One in the Room, and for more information on it, you can visit miltthompson.com. When we return to Our Issues Milwaukee, we'll continue our conversation about race when we're joined by a gifted communicator who is an adjunct professor at Marquette University teaching social justice and social movements, and she recently completed her first children's book. We'll meet Deanna Singh right after this.